Hi there, welcome back to the channel. My name is Troy Kinsey, and we have an exciting video planned for you today. Today we're going to use a clip from the movie Apollo 13 to illustrate some key concepts associated with the Major Incident Management Module, or MIM as we'll refer to it going forward. So let's start with that. What in the world is a MIM? So MIM is an IT term. Actually, specifically, it's an idle term, and it refers to the structures, processes, tools and technology, and personnel associated with the restoration of a critical incident. Now, I mentioned that this is an IT term, idle term. However, we can use these concepts that we'll be discussing throughout the video and apply them really to any service industry, as we'll see. So let's start with the definition of critical. So the definition of critical is, of course, going to vary based upon a number of factors. First and foremost, what is the service itself? What value is that service providing? Two is how our customers perceive that service and what happens when that service becomes either severely degraded or unavailable. And three, quite candidly, how does the organization determine, what is and is not critical? How do they define it from an organizational standpoint? So let's use a few examples to illustrate. So let's take a hotel organization, for example. From a hotel organization standpoint, the checking in of a customer into the hotel could be considered a critical service. If we can't do so efficiently and effectively, we could not only lose out on money, but potentially on reputation as well. So all of the structures, processes, tools, technology, personnel associated with checking in a hotel guest could be considered critical. Let's use a restaurant as another example. So the preparation of food, the delivery of food, and the processing of payment for a meal could all be either one overall comprehensive service that's considered critical, or a collection of services. And again, that's going to be based upon how the organization defines it. We'll use one more example, and then what we'll do is we'll include some other examples in the description below. So let's use an auto dealership. So from an auto dealership perspective, the enabling customers to be able to test drive cars, enable the organization to check on credit scores and secure a loan, all could be either one service or collection of services from an organization standpoint. And again, we'll include some of those included IT, some of them didn't, some IT aspects. We'll include some further examples in the description below. So the video that we're going to watch, speaking of which, if you have not seen Apollo 13, I strongly recommend that you do so. It's a fantastic film. I've seen a number of interviews and read a number of interviews with the actual astronauts that experienced what took place on Apollo 13. And my understanding is that it's very close to life. And not only that, it's just an exciting film. In fact, what I'll do is I'll include some interviews in the description below as well. So the clip we're about to see is when Jack Swigert, one of the astronauts in the space capsule, starts to electronically stir one of the oxygen tanks. I would ask that we look at a couple of things here as we're watching the video. So first is the level of stress that everyone is under, including in the space capsule as well as on the ground. Two is the communication. How are they communicating? So again, I would ask that we compare how they're communicating in the space capsule to how they're communicating at mission control. And the last one is an interesting one as well, which is, so think about how the individuals are responding to this critical incident and compare that to how our teams respond to when we have a critical incident. And we'll talk further on the next break here, but think about those things and we'll talk about it in just a moment. Let's go ahead and get started.
Hey, we've got a problem here.
What did you do?
Nothing. I stirred the tanks.
Whoa. Hey.
This is Houston. Say again, please.
Houston, we have a problem. We have a main bus B undervolt. We've got a lot of thruster
What's the
activity
story
here,
with the computer
Houston.
now?
It just went offline. Oh, there's another master alarm, Houston.
I'm checking the quad.
Christ, that was no repress valve.
Maybe it's in quad
We've
C.
got a computer restart.
I'm gonna reconfigure the RCS.
We've got a
When
pings
these things
light.
fire, it doesn't make any sense.
We've got multiple caution and warning, Houston. We've got a reset and restart.
All right, I'm going to SDS.
Jesus. Flight, the heart rates are skyrocketing.
Ecom, what's your data telling you?
O2, tank 2, not reading at all. Tank 1 is at 725 psi and falling. Fuel cells 1 and 3 are, oh boy, what's going on here? Flight, let me get back to you. Flight GNC? Flight, they're all over the place. They keep yawning close to gimbal lock.
I keep losing radio signal. Flight, their antenna must be flipped.
22, do it manually if they do.
One at a time, people. One at a time. One at a time. Ecom, is this an instrumentation problem, or are we looking at real power loss here?
It's reading a quadruple failure. That can't happen. It's got to be instrumentation.
All right, let's pause it there for a moment. So let's go back to those questions that we posed earlier. Stress. Clearly, they're under a lot of stress. The astronauts in the space capsule, as well as those individuals at mission control. I should know this. The astronauts are, I believe, all former test pilots. I will verify that. Pretty sure they all are. So they're used to contending with stress. Now, for the critical incidents that our teams contend with, while they might not, lives may or may not be in jeopardy, and they're probably not in a space capsule, there's stress nonetheless. Anytime that we're restoring a critical service, there's going to be stress. And so what we want to talk about are what are those ways in which we can decrease that and help our team be more comfortable, confident, efficient, and effective. So how do we mitigate some of that stress? And that stress is going to come from a number of places, right? So it's going to come from customers that need the service. Hence, we've defined the services as critical, so they need them probably as quickly as possible. The leadership is probably also asking when are these services going to be restored, what's happening, and so they need to be kept up to date and in the loop. And other colleagues that we're working with who may or may not be familiar with the service, are comfortable with restoring it, comfortable with the restoration processes, and the team may or may not have a lot of experience working with each other. And that's key. So as we watch the next clip, I would ask, what are some ways that we can mitigate some of that stress? So 2 is communications. And I pose that the astronauts in the space capsule are communicating a little bit differently, as I perceive it anyway, as the individuals on the ground in mission control. Now, I would pose that the reason for that has to do with how much the astronauts have actually drilled and gone through simulations over and over and over again, such that it's a little bit more seamless in terms of their roles, responsibilities, and how they communicate. It's very important that we define roles, responsibilities up front so that teams understand what those are. But as we enable teams to run through simulations and essentially walk through what-if scenarios, and we talk about simulations in another video, table reads and simulations, it's important that we provide them with this opportunity, because as they do so, as they run through those simulations, and as they get more comfortable working with each other, what's going to happen is those lines of demarcation in terms of the roles, responsibilities are going to blur a bit. And that's a great thing, because what that means is the team, individuals on the team feel more comfortable and confident working with each other, and they can start to anticipate what the other members of the team are going to do. Now, this isn't going to happen up front, and as I mentioned, we're going to want to make sure that we define those clearly, but over time, that's going to happen. So I think that's why. Obviously everyone has run through a number of simulations, but I think that the individuals, the astronauts in the space capsule, are just a little bit more tightly knit because they have run through so many simulations just with those 3 individuals. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Please put those in the comments below. The last thing that I want to bring up before we watch the next clip is the engineer sitting in front of the workstation watching. He makes an interesting statement. He says, well, this can't happen. This would be a quadruple failure. So I would ask that you think about this for the next clip. How can we anticipate an unanticipated event? How can we prepare the team, in other words, to handle situations that we can't anticipate? All right, let's go ahead and watch the next clip.
Let's get that hatch button. The limb might have been hit by a meteor.
Yep. The tunnel's really torquing with all this movement. Houston, we got a pretty large bang there associated with a master alarm. Shit, it's main bus A.
Main bus A undervolt?
Houston, we have a main bus A undervolt now too. It's reading 25 and a half. Main bus B is reading zip right now. We got a wicked shimmy up here.
Ecom, GNC, these guys are talking about bangs and shimmies up there. Doesn't sound like instrumentation to me.
You are breaking up 13.
Hey, get this hatch to seal.
Just stow it. We've been hit by a meteor. We'd be dead by now. We're gonna try to get us out of this lurch.
Houston, you're in the mud. Did you say switch to Omni Bravo? Roger, and the signal strength on the high
Fighting
gateway
me. What's the
down.
story here, Jack? We keep flirting with gimbal lock.
Honestly, we need a confirmation. What system do you have down?
Okay,
Having a hard
Jim.
time reading
SMRCS, Helium 1.
switch to
A
Omni,
and C
Charlie.
are barbacoa.
Houston, I'm switching over quad C to main A.
Roger that 13.
Okay, Houston. Fuel cell 1. Fuel cell 3. We got a main bus B undervolt. Cryo pressure. Suit compressor. What don't we have? AC bus 1. AC bus 2. Command module computer.
And O2 flow high. I don't know.
Maybe this is a caution and warning. failure.
Houston, we are venting something out into space.
I can see it outside of window 1 right now. It's definitely a gas of some sort.
It's got to be the oxygen.
Wow. All right. So I posed a couple of questions earlier. Let's talk about those. One, how do we reduce the amount of stress associated with major incident management? So we'll talk about that here in a moment. Two, and it's related, is I asked you to think about how your team responds to a major incident and how that compares to how the astronauts in mission control are responding to their major incident. Now, I've brought this up with a number of teams over the years, both large and small, and the response is typically the same. So typically the response is giggles and laughter. And the reason for that is several-fold, and this kind of relates back to stress. Teams are often not given enough of an opportunity to run through simulations. Oftentimes also individuals are swapped in and out of incident response teams for the simple fact that it's whoever happens to be on hand and available at the time responds to an outage or a severely degraded service. Three is there isn't a method or model for continuous improvement in place. So let's talk about addressing these items here. So in terms of continuous improvement, it's very important that teams get a chance right after a major incident to sit down and talk about what worked and what could we do to improve. Now, these really need to be supportive exercises because oftentimes individuals are unclear on their role or unclear in terms of how a process or technology works. Or any number of items that essentially might impact the performance of individuals. And so it's important that as a team, we look at the situation and we say, all right, so how can we help make sure that everyone understands what their role is and is comfortable doing so? Again, more simulations. And we talk about simulations and table reads in another video. So that's really important. There are other things that we can do in terms of preparing offline so that when we're faced with a major incident, we've reduced the amount of non-essential work that needs to be done. So what do I mean by that? So one of the things we can do is put together an impact statement. So, and I'll put an example up here. impact statement template. And essentially what that means is it's a way of standardizing how we're defining what's happening with an incident at any given point in time. So how is this useful? It drives everyone to, at least during the initial triage, to come up with one clear statement that defines what's happening. So we don't have different perspectives. We don't have translation issues in terms of people looking at what's happening and communicating it in a different way. So there's often a lot of confusion associated with that. Also, and this gets to the next point, we can create communication templates, and we can drop this impact statement into predefined communication templates so that when we're in the middle of a major incident, we're not having to wordsmith what kind of communication should go out, and we can define who needs to get a hold of that communication. So we set up, distribution lists and whatnot. So we're making it easier. Anything that we can do to offline to simplify the processes associated with major incident management is going to instill confidence in those individuals that are troubleshooting. Troubleshooting steps for the service, very helpful. So having service owners provide, these are the steps that need to be gone through in order to determine what's happening and resolve an incident, a major incident. So one last question that we posed earlier: how can we plan for an event that we can't anticipate? So this is an interesting one. This gets to risk management as well. It's really important that it's not, how do I put this? It's not as important that we try to determine every permutation of things that could go wrong, as much as it is having the team think through how are they going to respond when things like this happen. So the simulations, again, are really important. So the team gets more comfortable and confident in terms of how they communicate with each other, how they work together. That's more important than trying to, again, determine all the different possible permutations of things that can go wrong. And this applies not only to incident response teams, but any team really, a project management team, having the team before a project starts, sit down and talk about how we're communicating and how are we going to contend with issues as they arise is really important. And I think that's kind of, that's not done as much as we could. So, all right, in terms of summarizing, again, major incident management is all about restoring critical services. Now, what it's not is it's not about getting to the root cause and determining why it happened in the first place and addressing the root cause. That's all a whole separate idle process called problem management. And we'll talk about that in another video. Major incident management is all about restoring service so that customers are able to use it as intended. Okay, so hopefully you found this video informative and entertaining. We'd like to hear your thoughts, your own experiences and feedback. If you're willing to do so, please put those in the comments below, and we will see you in the next video. Bye-bye now.